Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout New Vegas, where we are once again going to be taking a look at a weapon in Fallout New Vegas. This time we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite weapons, even though not particularly a very strong weapon. This is the Silent 22 pistol. This is one of the cooler guns in the game, in my opinion. I really like the Silent 22. I think it's a really cool design, and I love that it showed up in Fallout. There's actually not a whole lot of 22 caliber guns that show up throughout the Fallout series, and this is actually only one of two guns in Fallout New Vegas that gets the 22. So let's go over the base stats and some pros and cons to the 22, and then rank it in our tier list. So for the base stats of the 22, this one requires 0 guns and 1 strength to wield, making it so that literally any character built any way can already effectively use the 22 pistol, which that should be a thing in the game. 22s should not require very much strength to wield, nor should they require that much skill. I like this in the game. I think it's really cool. And even if you're going with like an explosives character, you can absolutely take this. If you're going with a melee character, you can still take this if you would like. It kind of works with any sort of build that you want. Now for the base stats, the Silent 22 does a whopping 9 damage per shot, which is very low, even with modifiers on it, so you can put all the perks and everything that goes to it. It doesn't actually raise it up by that much. I think it raises it to like 10.2 or something like that. There's no specific perk that actually helps out the Silent 22, although there is a couple perks that do help it overall. We'll talk about those when we go to the pros and cons. This has 32 damage per second on it, which is pretty good. The 22 can actually shoot fairly fast. This has an 18 crit damage on it, which is double the base damage, which is pretty unusual. Most weapons tend to have the same amount of crit damage as their base damage. The Silent 22 actually has double that, which is really nice. This has a 3 times crit modifier, which is pretty above average. That's actually, I think, one of the highest of the handguns, or maybe it is the highest out of any of the handguns. Not counting some of the energy pistols, like the Alien Blaster, which has a 100 times multiplier on it. 3 times is still very high, though. This one uses 17 action points per shot, so it's very low. It's actually quite good in an action point build. This one has fairly low spread for a handgun. Nothing crazy. It's not one of the most accurate handguns, but it's not one of the least accurate either. It holds 16 rounds in it by default, which is quite high. This weighs 3 weight in total, and this has 100 item health. So for the basic pros of the Silent 22, this one is silent, which is really nice. Suppressors on guns tend to make it so enemies are less likely to get alerted to you, at least if you're killing nearby enemies with them, or if you hit them with it, then you're probably just going to go to caution, and then you can more easily back that down to the hidden status, so you can do another sneak crit if you would like, which the Silent 22 is actually pretty good at. This counts as a holdout weapon regardless of your skill at all. It doesn't matter how much stealth you have, you can always sneak a Silent 22 into any holdout area, which is pretty cool. This has pretty good crits, and it hits crits pretty often. A 3 times crit modifier is really good. If you have something like 10 luck at the very start of the game, then each point of luck counts towards 1% to your crit chance, and this is additive. So you have 10% crit chance at 10 luck, and then if you add a 3 times multiplier, that'd be a 30% chance of every shot being a crit, which is pretty good, especially since the gun definitely excels at hitting crits. And then you can also buff this up even further with other perks. Like the Professional is actually a pretty good perk to have with this one, where you can do extra crit damage, since crits are going to be where most of your damage is coming from. You can also buff it up with things like better crits to have even stronger crits. You could buff it with Finesse, which will give you an increased crit chance, or Light Touch, which will also give you a percent bonus to crit chance. And then you could also take extra crit clothing, something like the Lucky Shades that will get you extra crit chance, or the First Recon Beret, which will also get you crit chance. If you stack all that on the Silent 22, it's actually not too bad for dealing damage, and has pretty good damage per second. This one also does have a large magazine for a pistol. It has one of the largest magazines out of any pistol, so with that, followed by the extra crits and the fast rate of fire from it, the 22 can actually be surprisingly decent. For the general cons of the 22, though, is that it's kind of a rare-ish weapon. Not everybody sells these, and not a whole lot of people have them, so repairing them in the early game can be a little bit of a pain. Later on, it's not such a big deal if you have jury rigging and you want to repair your 22 with other weapons, because it will just count for any pistol then. It also isn't that big of a deal if you can make weapon repair kits, or if you just have money to where you can go to vendors and have them repair it for you. Second con is that it is kind of rare in terms of ammo, because not a whole lot of people actually sell 22 rounds. It can be kind of annoying trying to buy them, and you might have to just keep resetting areas if you are dead set on using the 22, so that you can at least get more and more bullets back from them. It also doesn't have particularly high damage per shot. That is kind of rough, especially when you're not hitting crits. So if you're in the early game and you don't have a crit build set up yet, the Silent 22 can struggle quite a bit. And then it also lacks a lot of ammo options, since the Silent 22 only gets 3 ammo options. as opposed to most other weapons that get quite a few different ammo options. This gets the standard 22 rounds, the 22 plinking rounds, which you have to buy in bulk, and the 22 hollow point rounds. So the standard 22 rounds just do base damage, just like all the standard rounds do. Plinking rounds make it so you do slightly less damage with the 22. It doesn't actually break your weapon any quicker or anything like that, but it is just less damage. And again, you do have to buy these in bulk, but every time you buy them, I think for every one that you buy, you get 100 rounds of plinking rounds, so it's actually not too bad, especially since you can keep refreshing chat at the very start of the game and get a decent amount of this stocked up if you want to use the 22. And then for the hollow point rounds, these ones technically can be your best or your worst round. They don't do well against enemies in armor, and the Silent 22 does not do well against armored enemies in general because it does have low damage. So they can actually absorb quite a bit of the damage from the 22 and still just tank right through it. Rad Scorpions can be pretty rough in the early game, and enemies potentially wearing heavy armor, like metal armor, or even just leather armor, can actually slow the 22 down quite a bit. So that kind of sucks. Hollow point rounds at least lets you do more damage towards enemies that don't have armor, but if enemies do have armor, then the hollow point rounds are almost completely useless. So for a tier list ranking for the Silent 22, I would probably put this into the D tier of weapons. It's still one of my favorite weapons, but it's not a particularly strong weapon. It does kind of get out-competed by quite a few other pistols. If you want a pistol that can do a similar job, there's quite a lot of them that can actually beat out this one. It's not a terrible weapon by any means. It's not going to our F tier at all because F tier is going to be saved for some of the truly terrible weapons that are in New Vegas. This one is still perfectly usable, and if you do build a crit build in it, it's not bad at all. It's just that once you start hitting armored enemies, you're basically just stuck with using the standard 22 rounds, and you're still stuck with the problem that the 22 rounds are just kind of rare, so you're going to have to be waiting days and then going around to different vendors. The Great Con vendor tends to sell a lot of 22 rounds, so that's probably the best option for buying 22 rounds if you want to use this or the 22 SMG, and it still has some purpose. It's not a terrible weapon if you just want to carry it around because it doesn't really weigh anything, and if you just wanted to pick off smaller or weaker enemies, by all means do that, or if you just don't want to build the sneak and you just want to have something that you can sneak into casinos, the Silent 22 is decent enough. It's by no means one of the strongest holdout weapons, especially when you have holdout weapons like Chance's Knife. So just like all of these, should you use the Silent 22? Maybe. If you're gonna go with just a strong build all the way around, you can probably skip it. It's not gonna be a huge deal. It might be okay in the early game. And if you're going for a crit build, it can still be kind of decent, even though, again, there are better handguns than it and better weapons for building a sneak build. It's still a really cool gun, and I do really like it. Tell me your thoughts on the Silent 22 down in the comments below, and tell me what weapon you would like to see next. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye, everyone!